Chapter 10. I hope you're kidding, Josh said. It's a Halloween joke, right? I'm not kidding. I felt skin. Dink followed Ruth Rose's voice. Where? Rose took Dink's hand and stretched out his arm. Dink's fingers felt clothing like a shirt. Moving his hands, he felt another pair of hands and rope wound around them. He moved his hand and felt the face. Then his fingers touched something smooth, not skin. It was tape. The mouth behind the tape made a choking sound. Guys, there's someone tied up and gagged down here. Help me get him loose. Dink worked on the tape. He found a corner and carefully pulled it away. Thanks, man. I could hardly breathe. Who are you? I'm Hank. Those two guys who tossed you in here stole my truck. The Ride-'em Cowboy truck? Yes. I was supposed to go to the bank and pick up one of my mechanical horses. They jumped me and drove me here. I've been in this stinking hole for hours. Can you get these ropes off? The knots are too tight. Here, try this. Ruth Rose handed him a knife. Just then they heard a loud motor over their heads. Are they leaving? No, they're using a paint sprayer on the truck. I hope they choose a good color. Dink opened a blade in Ruth Rose's knife. Soon the ropes were off, and Hank sat up in the dark. Thanks, kids. Who are you anyway? Dink explained who they were and why they had hidden in the truck. So they robbed the bank and hid the money inside my horse? Yeah, and they're going to get away with it. Maybe not, Dink said. The cops might be here by then. What cops? The police think the robbers took off last night. And how would the cops find us anyway? My dad will tell them. Your dad? He doesn't even know where we are. That's what I started to tell you when Ruth Rose found Hank. Before the jerk grabbed Ruth Rose's phone, I hit the green talk button. That would have dialed my dad's number, right, Ruth Rose? And Dad would have heard that what those guys were planning. He'll call the cops, and maybe they'll see the money we threw out of the truck, Ruth Rose said. She explained to Hank how they had emptied one of the stolen bags. Cool idea, Hank said. What if your dad didn't answer his phone? What if he left it somewhere or went out for a walk without it? Dink felt his stomach clench. He hadn't thought of that. Of course, if his dad didn't hear the phone, he wouldn't answer it and he wouldn't hear what any of them were saying. He usually keeps it with him. Let's just cool it. My partner must be wondering where I am right now. When I don't go back, he'll call the cops. I wonder if this place has room service, Josh said. I need cookies and milk. Dink, how'd you figure it out? How'd you know the money was inside the horse? The guy they call Ace is wearing cowboy boots with silver toes. I saw him yesterday in front of the bank, and the rope he used to tie the tarp over the horse was the same rope the woman Bonnie was tied up with. And yesterday, when we were watching the mechanical horse, he said something about Bonnie filling it with green candy. Green candy is money, Josh said. Last night before the fire, I saw two guys near the horses. One of them had something shiny on his feet. At first, I thought it was that cop who was dressed as a spaceman. He was wearing sneakers with heels that lit up. But now I realize what I saw was the silver tips of Ace's cowboy boots. So you figured out it was an inside job? Right. I think Bonnie was lying when she told the police that the men kidnapped her late last night. I'll bet she let them inside early this morning. When the vault opened at 8 o'clock, they hid the money inside the horse. Then they tied Bonnie up to make it look like she was innocent. She knew her boss would come pretty soon and find her, right? Yeah. But by the time they figured everything out, Ace and Goose would be far away with the money. She's probably going to meet them somewhere. But I still don't understand why they burned the hay wagons last night. The way I figure, they wanted the cops to think the bank was robbed late at night while we were all stuck in the woods. Bonnie told Officer Cleaver that the crooks came at midnight and took only a small amount of money then left. The police would figure the crooks had over 8 hours to get away and wouldn't bother going after them. Wow, that was some plan, Hank said, when the real plan was to hide the bags of money in the horse after the vault opened this morning. Right. Bonnie must have told Ace and Goose that you were coming to pick up your horse, so they decided to take your truck so they could get the horse. You got that right. They jumped me outside my house, made me spill my coffee. Next thing I knew, I was in this hole. Suddenly, the paint sprayer motor stopped. What's going on? Either they finished the paint job or they ran out of paint. The four prisoners sat in the dark listening, but they heard nothing. Dink had an idea. Hank, can I stand on your shoulders? He asked. Chapter 11. Sure, kid, you got a plan? Yeah. If I can move whatever they used to cover the hole, maybe I can run to town and get the police. And leave us here? I don't know what else we can do. If we just stay here, they'll get away with the money. We don't know how long it will take the police to find us. Yeah, maybe they were lying about letting the police know where we are. They lied about everything else. Okay, kid, it's worth a try. Dink heard Hank position himself. Okay, step on my knee, then I'll hoist you up. A minute later, Dink was standing on Hank's shoulders. Hank held Dink's hand so he wouldn't topple off. Dink felt like an acrobat in a circus. You okay? Yeah, only I feel like I'm going to fall. You're fine. I won't let you fall. Can you reach the top? I'll let go of one of your hands, all right? Okay. Hank, I'm falling. Grab my head. Dink's free hand found the top of Hank's head and he held on. Okay, you want to try again? I'm ready. With his left hand still clutching Hank's left hand, he reached his right hand straight up. His fingers swept the air blindly, feeling nothing. Then they made contact. I think I'm touching the top. What is it? Can you lift it up? Dink dragged his fingertips along something rough. He pushed the flat object, lifted but only slightly. I think it's wood, Hank. I need both hands. He felt Hank release them. Go for it, kid. I got you. Slowly, Dink reached both hands over his head. He felt himself swaying in the dark. He steadied his feet on Hank's shoulders. He took a breath and slowly pushed upward. It felt like the thin plywood he, Josh, and Ruth Rose used to build a treehouse in Josh's backyard. The flat wood lifted a few inches. For a moment, Dink was blinded by sunlight. The stink of fresh paint stung his nostrils. He squinted and looked across the barn floor. He saw old farm tools and clumps of hay. He saw the rear of the truck not far away. Turning his head, Dink saw the mechanical horse on its side. He wondered if the money was still inside. The blue tarp was in a heap near the horse. Dink peered under the truck between the tires. He had a clear view of the old house. On its steps sat Ace and Goose. Several bank bags were on the ground. They were counting the money. No way am I going to be able to run for help, Dink said. He knew they'd grab him before he took 2 steps. Dink made another discovery. One of the truck tires was only inches from his fingers. He smiled at his new idea, glad he had hung on to Ruth Rose's knife. He gently let the wood down and rested his arms against the bottom surface. Hank, yeah, kid. Does your truck have a spare tire? Nope, been meaning to get one. I need one of those tin cans on the floor. Hank relayed the message to Josh and Ruth Rose. Dink heard his friend scurrying in the dark to find a can. Coming up, Hank said. Dink slowly reached one hand down and took a tin can from Hank. He lifted the wood again and used the can to prop it open. Then he eased the knife from his pocket. Dink slid his arm out past the can. He pushed the tip of the knife blade against the truck's rubber tire. Chapter 12. But he couldn't do it. His plan had been to slash a tire so Ace and Goose couldn't drive away with the money. But this was Hank's truck and Hank's tires. Why should I ruin a perfectly good tire? Dink asked himself. Then he had another idea. He folded away the knife blade and flipped out a tiny screwdriver. He held the knife in his right hand. With his left, he reached out and unscrewed the little cap over the tire's air valve. Then he inserted the tip of the screwdriver into the valve and pushed. He heard air escaping from the tire. He hoped that the 2 crooks didn't hear the hissing noise. When the tire was flat, Dink shoved the knife into his pocket. He removed the tin can and began to lower the plywood. Then from the corner of his eye, he saw something interesting. The yellow rope Ace and Goose had used to secure the tarp over the mechanical horse. It was in a pile near the truck's rear tire. Dink reached an arm out of the hole and grabbed the rope. He tied one end of the rope to the truck's bumper. He yanked on it to tighten the knot. Then he dropped the rest of the rope down into the hole. Hank, I'm coming down, he whispered. I got you. A few seconds later, Dink was kneeling on the damp floor of the hole. Once again, he felt blind. What did you see up there? They're counting the money. There's an old house and a yard. Hank, your truck is red now. What's with the rope? I tied it to your truck. I thought maybe you could climb up and out. Then you could pull us out. Awesome. This is better than TV. It might work. Where are those guys? Will they see me? I don't think they will. They're over by the house. Your truck is between this hole and them. Okay, I'm tying a loop in the end of this rope. After I'm up, you kids can put your feet into the loop and I'll pull you up one at a time. Hank tugged the rope. Dink heard him grunting. He remembered trying to climb a thick rope in gym. It wasn't easy. A moment later, Dink, Josh, and Ruth Rose saw daylight. Hank moved the plywood. Who's going first? You go. You did all the work. No, let Josh go. He's the strongest. He can help Hank pull us up. I think Ruth Rose should go first. She's afraid of the dark. I'm not afraid of the dark, Joshua Pinto. Go on up. Dink figured Josh was just being nice. Everyone knew Josh hated dark places. Go on, Josh. Josh stuck a foot into the loop. The rope became taut, and Hank hauled him up. Your turn, Dink said to Ruth Rose. Are you sure? I love dark, smelly places. Ruth Rose followed up Josh. Dink could hear Hank's deep breathing. For the last time, the looped end of the rope fell to Dink's feet. But before Dink could put a foot into the yellow rope, it came slicing through the air, landing on his head. It was no longer tied to the truck's bumper. Dink stared straight up. Who had untied the rope or cut it? Where were Josh and Ruth Rose and Hank? Suddenly, Dink heard a man's voice shout. Then he heard more yells. Surely that was Ruth Rose's loud scream. Dink thought he heard cars arriving. There were thudding footprints and more yelling. This time, Dink was sure it was Josh. Then silence. He stared at the escape hole above his head. He saw dust floating in the sunlight. He heard only a lonely bird call, and then nothing. He sat on the damp floor. He held the rope in his hands, and he closed his eyes, hoping that when he opened them, he would see Hank's face looking back down. He heard footsteps and looked up. Part of the light was blocked by a man's head. Dink, your friend Josh tells me maple walnut's your favorite ice cream. Why don't you send a ladder down? Why don't I send a ladder down for you? Then we'll go get some. Thanks, Officer Cleaver. A few hours later, Dink, Josh, and Ruth Rose were on their way back to Connecticut. Dink's father drove slowly through town, heading for the highway. Look, the bank's closed. Yeah, they need to hire a new teller. Miss Bonnie is behind bars with her brother, Ace and Goose. I'm glad you had your cell phone with you, Mr. Duncan. Me too. I knew the call was coming from your cell phone, so when I heard a man's voice, I was shocked. I was able to hear everything Ace and Goose said, even after they put you in the hole. I drove to the police station with my phone to my ear. How much money did they have inside the horse? Officer Cleaver told me it was about $500,000. Did they find the money we threw away? Some of it. I'll bet a lot of people will be finding money for quite a while. Just then, Dink saw three familiar kids on the sidewalk. Dad, can you stop for a minute? It's those kids we met last night. Dink, Josh, and Ruth Rose climbed out. Hi, you guys. Guess what I just found, Candy said. A $50 bill. It was just lying by the side of the road. Boy, are you lucky, Ruth Rose said. We're going to make her split it with us, right, Andy? It's the only interesting thing that happened in this boring town. I can't wait to get back home, the other boy shouted. We're leaving too, Josh said. Nothing ever happens around here. The six kids slapped high fives and said goodbyes. Will they have to return the money? Probably if the bank decides to let the public know how the money got thrown out of the truck. Speaking of which, there may be a reward for you three. Really? Awesome. Dad, did the police say if they found the wagon horses? They ran away last night during the fire. Yep, all three horses are back with their owners, and the farmers all had insurance, so they'll get money to buy new wagons. This is the best Halloween I ever had. It was the scariest, that's for sure. There's one thing I don't understand. Dink's father looked at Josh. What's that, Josh? Who was riding the horse we saw out our window last night before the hay wagon came? You know, the headless dude? Gee, Josh, I have no idea, Mr. Duncan said. Maybe it was one of the town cops. Officer Cleaver pretended to lose his head on the wagon, remember? I asked Officer Cleaver when we were at the police station. He told me the headless horseman wasn't one of his officers. Then who was it? Josh asked. A ghost? No one in the car said anything. Mr. Duncan pulled onto the highway and headed for home. That's the end. So go and take your AR test now. Good luck.